What is up, everyone? Joey Jojo here, bringing you Chapter 9 of Umineko, Episode 1, Legend of the Golden Witch. Last episode, we went over basically the children coming back from the beach. And then, no, that was Chapter 7. So, last chapter, Maria read the letter that she was given to by Beatrice. And everyone's freaking out. Like, what the hell is going on? So, we are back to Chapter 9. I know I haven't posted in a while. Life was catching up. So, yeah. I believe it's this one right here. I believe so, yeah. Alright, let's do this. The strange letter that the witch had entrusted Maria had wiped all memories of dinner from our minds. Maria had been repeatedly barraged with questions by Auntie Rosa, and the other parents, and was now in the worst of tempers because no one would believe her. Even when we kids tried to talk to her, she would just ignore us. Our parents were all stirred up over the gold, firing back and forth about the distribution of the assets and completely forgetting that we children were even there. Even though I'd already figured out that they had been talking about this in the shadows, I never thought they'd be this blunt about it, and at least to us kids, as it was a considerable shock. For what we could overhear, all our parents wanted as much money as possible, as soon as possible. Back and forth about grandfather's inheritance. Back and forth about the distribution of the gold, if it was found. About advance payments and cash. It was so despicable I couldn't bear to watch, even though one of them was my dad. It looked like Jessica felt the same way. We left our seats, although no one had asked us to leave, and went to hang out somewhere apart from the parents.
なるほどな。じいさまが飯の席にも顔を出したくない理由がよーくわかったよ。うちの親たちにはすっかり幻滅だぜ。金だの遺産だの。よくもまああそこまで大っぴらに。
俺の場合はクソ親父に幻滅しきってるからよ。これ以上評価の下がりようがないぜ。
そんなの私だって同じだぜ。しかし今夜のには呆れた。心底呆れたぜ。
Jessica looked down at the floor, irritated. She was happy talking about how bad her parents were, but maybe she hadn't really felt that way deep inside. I could realize that from the depths of Jessica's shock.
未成年の君たちはご両親に養育してもらってるからわからないだろうけど、お金を得るというのは単純な綺麗事じゃないよ。未成年である今にそれを理解しろとは言わない。でもご両親なりに何かの努力をしていることだけは認めてあげてほしいな。
やれやれ。ジョージの兄貴は人間ができてるぜ。
ジョージ兄さんは社会人になってバリバリ働いてるけどよ。金とか財産とかそういう話になったらうちの親父たちみたいに強欲むき出しのハゲタカになれるってのかよ。
自分だけの話だったらそんなことはしたくないよ。でも家族や社員、部下やその家族の生活を背負ったら戦わなければならない時もあるかもしれない。
私はそんな戦い嫌だぜ。小さまの遺産がどうのこうのなんて話ヘドが出るぜ。
Jessica pretended to spit violently. That harsh reaction made the depths of her pain very clear.
もうこの話はやめようぜ。じい様の隠し黄金がどうのこうの、財産だ遺産だって話は親たちの問題で俺たちの問題じゃないさ。
僕も同感だよ。せめて気を利かせて親たちの話し合いを邪魔しないのが子供の務めだと思うね。
なんだか面白くねえぜ。
Everyone knows the phrase adults are filthy, but we had now seen that for ourselves, and that really did give us a shock. George Aniki was now pretty much an adult, and I had already been disillusioned with my dad in the first place, so the shock wasn't that big for us. But it looked like it was different for Jessica. It looked like the shock that Jessica had received was even bigger than I had thought. This girl, she was always talking badly about her parents, but it looked like she hadn't changed at all on the inside since long ago. Even now, she was still a pure-hearted and delicate person who couldn't doubt others. I'm sure she respected her parents as much as anyone else does. And then her parents started joining in with all the other parents right in front of us children, going, money, money, inheritance, inheritance, my money. So it was no surprise that the shock of hearing that was so big.
ジェシカちゃん、どうかお父さんとお母さんのことを嫌いにならないで。理解しろとまでは言わないから、せめてどうか嫌いにならないであげて。
分かってるよ。少し放っておいてくれよ。
6 years ago, I would have further taunted the dejected Jessica, but even I have grown up over the past 6 years. I realized that it would be better to leave Jessica as she was right now. Jessica suddenly looked away sulkily and left the parlor. She probably wanted to be left alone for now. I could do nothing but wordlessly watch her back as she left.
そういえば、マリアちゃんはどこに行ったんだろう。
多分まだ肖像画の前でいじけてるんだろうぜ。
Maria, who truly looked up to witches, had expected that coming in direct contact with Beatrice and receiving the letter as proof would be an event that would surprise everyone and make them happy. However, the adults had doubted its authenticity, had not taken Maria's story at face value, and had thoroughly bombarded her with questions. Even I didn't find it hard to imagine how much that must have hurt Maria. We couldn't speak to either Maria or Jessica. In the end, George Aniki and I just abandoned ourselves to the sound of the falling rain in the dark night.
台風はどんな感じなんだろうね。ニュースをやってないかな。
George Aniki walked over to the corner of the parlor where the television was. He hadn't called me over, and I really couldn't have cared less where the typhoon was on the sea now. So I didn't go over to the television, but instead loitered around the window.
そんなに風は出てなさそうだけど、海の上はひどいのかしらね。天気予報では暴風警報も聞いてたんだけど。
キリエさんか。大人たちの積もる話はどんな感じなんすか？
It looked like she caught the sarcasm. Kiri-san shrugged.
この胃の痛くなる話は徹夜で続くのかしら。嫌になるわ。
まあせいぜいよろしく。じい様の財産分配についてハゲタカごっこをお楽しみくださいってんだ。最低の気分だぜ。
それに関しては同感よ。バトラ君みたいに席が外せるなら私もそうしたいわ。でもそうもいかない。たとえ発言権がなくてもね。パートナーも大変よ。
Kiri-san sighed, smiling bitterly. Well, yeah. They probably won't let Kiri-san, who married into the family, speak. Still, as Dad's partner, she had no choice but to stay by his side and support him. Being in the line of fire, she must be having to bear far greater mental pressure than me. I wasn't going to apologize, but realizing that I had spoken too harshly, I cut the sarcasm for the time being.
どんな感じなんすか？相変わらず謎の魔女ベアトリーチェの話題で持ちきりですか？
まあね。あの人たちはおじい様が亡くなった時の遺産分配について兄弟4人で話をまとめようとずっと密約を重ねてきた。そこへ未知の5人目が現れて話をややこしくしようっていうんだから穏便な話のわけもないわ。互いを罵り合ったりかと思えば共闘しようってことになったり。 夏日姉さんでなくても頭痛がしてくるところよ。
On the one hand, they all wanted a large portion than the other siblings, so they were all rivals. But on the other hand, they didn't want 1 yen to be snatched up by anyone other than the siblings, so they were also all allies. I couldn't get her to tell me the details, but they were apparently arguing on and on about their ceasefire agreement and rules to prevent anyone from getting ahead. The situations under which their portions would be protected, and what legal measures would be taken in the worst case scenario. By this point, my emotions had run straight past disgust, and now I perceive them as a force to be reckoned with.
ってことは、ベアトリーチはじいさまからの資格ってとこですかね。自分抜きで遺産の分配なんて話を勝手に進めてた息子たちに一泡吹かせたかったんだろうぜ。
何者かしらね、ベアトリーチェって。自称してることが全て本当なら、今日まで誰にも知られずにいた謎の人物で、しかもおじいさまの隠し黄金の存在を知っていて、その上当主の指輪まで委ねられている。相当に信頼された人物ね。
さすがにほうきにまたがった魔女だとは思わないっすけど、でも魔女と呼ぶに値する怪人物であることは間違いないっすね。
マリアちゃんがそのあたりのことを詳しく話してくれればいいのだけど、みんな小さい子にがっつきすぎだわ。すっかり怯えてしまって、聞けるものも聞けなくなってしまった。あの人たち、北風と太陽とか読んだことないのかしら。
確かなのは、マリアがベアトリーチェと名乗る人物から手紙を受け取ったこと。自分で現れて直接話せばいいものを、手紙を託して今もどこかに身を潜めているっていうシャイな怪人物ですけどね。
ねえバトラ君、ベアトリーチェなんて人物が本当にいると思う？
さあ、あくまでも偽名じゃないっすかね。じいさまの代理人としてその妄想の中の魔女の名を名乗ることを許されたとか。
そうじゃなくて、今この六軒島には全部で18人いるの。19人目が存在すると思う？
Are there really a whole 18 people on this island? Wondering about that, I began counting on my fingers, and it really did come out to 18 people.
19人目が存在すると思うって、どういう意味ですか？
言葉通りの意味よ。マリアちゃんに傘を貸した人物は私たち18人の中にはいないらしい。なら19人目がいて、その人物がマリアちゃんに傘を貸したと思うのが妥当じゃない？
まあ、そうなりますね。
ならその人物は今どこにいるの？少なくとも雨が降り出した瞬間には島にいた。そしてその後はどんどん天気は悪化して、とても船なんか出せない状態となれば、その人物はまだ島の中にいて、どこかで雨宿りをしていなくてはならない。私たち誰の目にも触れずね。
確かに俺たちは屋敷やゲストハウスの中を勝手にうろつき回ってましたが、誰も19人目なんかには会ってないわけですよね。でもまあこれだけの広さのある島ですし、屋敷やゲストハウス以外に雨宿りできるところだってあるのかも。
At about this time, I began to realize what direction Kiri-san's doubts were taking us in. Kiri-san was denying that a 19th person existed. Beatrice was one of us 18. In other words, she thought that someone we knew well was using her name.
ベアトリーチェが自称する通りなら、その人物は間違いなく最高の賓客よ。おじいさまが信頼する最高の腹心。そんな人物をおじいさまが歓待しないわけがない。お屋敷に迎え入れないわけはないのよ。でも私たちは誰も見ていない。
待ってくださいよ。それはちょいと請求な推理じゃないですか。確かに誰の目にも触れてはいないけれど、 だからって19人目を否定することにはならないんじゃないですか。何かの理由があってこっそり上陸してずっと隠れているのかも。悪魔の証明ってやつっすよ。いることを証明するのはたやすい。ベアトリーチェってやつが俺たちの前に現れて挨拶すりゃ解決する。でも19人目がいないことを証明するのは不可能っすよ。
バトラ君の推理の仕方は悪くないわ。現在の状況では19人目の存在を認めるにも否定するにも情報が足りない。でもね、チェス盤をひっくり返して考えるとほぼ19人目はありえないって断言できちゃうのよ。
Flip over the chessboard was one of Kiri-san's favorite phrases. I had also been influenced by those words and used them myself from time to time. When you get stuck trying to find a move in chess or shogi, by flipping the board over and looking at everything from your opponent's standpoint, you can often see a strategy that will give you the upper hand. Derived from this, it means to think by putting yourself in your opponent's shoes.
いい？仮に19人目の人物としてベアトリーチェが実在したとして、その人物は誰にも知られることなくこっそりとこの島に上陸しずっと隠れていた。何かの理由があってね。ならどうしてわざわざ姿を現してマリアちゃんに手紙を渡したの？
It really was a contradiction. If they had some reason for hiding themselves, then they should have stayed hidden the whole time, but they had appeared openly in front of Maria.
それはほらマリアも言ってた。メッセンジャーにされたって言ってたじゃないですか。マリアが一番年下で素直そうだったからじゃ。
メッセンジャーなんて必要なの？手紙を親族会議の席上に送りたかったら郵送すればいいだけの話よ。4人の兄弟全員に郵送すれば黙殺することもできない。手紙を持参してこっそり手渡す理由がないのよ。
確かになんだかおかしな話っすね。
そもそもベアトリーチェが存在していてその存在をアピールしたいならみんなの前に堂々と姿を現せばいいだけの話なのに現れず、マリアちゃんという小さな子を通しておぼろげな輪郭だけでその存在を主張しようとする曖昧さ、矛盾。もっと考えて。マリアちゃんの前に姿を現し19人目の存在を印象づけるという点と、今この瞬間も私たちの前に姿を現さず隠れ続けている点、これらの矛盾、これを念頭に置いた上でチェス盤をひっくり返すの。つまり19人目の人物としてベアトリーチェがいると印象づけたい人物の目論見は何かよ。
姿を隠したい人物ならその存在をアピールするわけがない。そして姿を現したい人物なら手紙を託すなんて遠回しをするわけがないってことは。
簡単よ。ベアトリーチェは18人の中にいるのよ。だからこそ18人以外の人物が存在するような幻想を作り出しているのよ。これ見よがしな19人目のアピール。それで得をするのは姿を潜めた19人目じゃない、すでにいる18人の方なのよ。もちろんこの推理は穴だらけ。いくつかの前提がひっくり返るだけですぐに崩れる脆いものだけど、私はほぼ間違いないと見てるわ。
This was quickly starting to sound pretty creepy. Who had let Maria that umbrella and handed her the letter? All of the 18 had been ruled out. And yet, Beatrice was hiding among those 18. What was that person planning? Hiding their true form and pretending to be Beatrice?
マリアちゃんの自作自演も疑ったんだけど、文章の内容が非常に手が込んでて、マリアちゃんが自前で用意したとは考えがたい。でもマリアちゃんが何者かと共謀している可能性も否定できないわ。
おいおい、マリアは9歳のお子様だぜ。誰と何を共謀するってんだよ。しかも愚直で真面目で素直なあの性分だぜ。
ええ、私もマリアちゃんの性分はよく理解しているわ。でもだからこそありえると思うの。魔女に憧れ その存在を盲信している夢見がちな少女。そこにベアトリーチェと名乗る人物が現れて魔女だと名乗ったら、彼女はそれを大喜びで鵜呑みにして信じるんじゃないかしら。
つまりあの肖像画のごついドレスを着て変装すればマリアを騙すことは難しくないと。
その論法になっちゃうと、私たち女性陣はみんな疑われちゃうことになるんだけどね。とにかくマリアちゃんが何者に出会ったのか、それの詳細を聞くことがこの謎を解く一番にして最も身近な鍵なのよ。しかしその鍵は少女の心の奥に堅くなに閉ざされてしまったわ。みんなが頭ごなしに魔女の存在を否定し、一体その人物は誰なのかと問い詰めすぎた。マリアちゃんは当分大人には心を開かないでしょうね。
In the dim hall, in front of the portrait of Beatrice, Maria was sobbing.
誰もね、マリアがベアトリーチェに会ったことを信じベアトリーチェとくれた手紙も見せたのに、それでも信じてくれないの。
とにかく鍵はマリアちゃんが握ってるわ。ベアトリーチェが18人の中にいるのか19人目なのか、それを知る鍵をね。
マリアは頑固だぜ。あいつへそを曲げるとなかなか機嫌を直さないからな。
大人の私より子供のバトラ君の方が機嫌を直せる確率は高そうよ。彼女の機嫌が直ったら聞いてみて。遺産分配がどうのこうのって話には関心ないけど、こんな王道洋館ミステリーみたいなシチュエーションにはワクワクしちゃわない？マリアちゃんに手紙を渡した人物は一体誰なのか。知的好奇心がうずくわ。
うんざりするような金の話に付き合わされてもワクワクとは実にタフなことだぜ。大人はすげえや。
I shrugged, exasperated. But I had realized. She had noticed the dejection I was feeling because I had overheard our parents' turbulent discussion, and was probably trying to turn my mood around. She had at least managed to make me feel good enough to hurl abuse. She wasn't my real mother, so I never felt like calling her mom, but it did make me think she's a real adult.
おうガキども、ここにいたのか。キリエも長え化粧直しじゃねえか。俺も次からは化粧をしてくることにするぜ。
ごめんなさい、女の化粧は長いのよ。どう？兄弟水入らずの話し合いは。
さぞや和気あいあいとしてるだろうよ。
Kiri-san poked the weak spot under my arm with her elbow.
一度頭を冷やそうってことで小休止さ。こりゃ夜通しになりそうだぜ。泣けてくれ。
His way of talking had changed, but he couldn't completely hide his fatigue. I couldn't say I was sympathetic, but he looked pitiful compared to his normal energetic self.
しかしひでえ雨だな。ゲストハウスに戻るのも嫌になるぜ。夏日姉さんが屋敷で泊まれるよう準備してくれたらしい。どうする
？3階になった時に考えてもいいんじゃない？部屋に戻る体力もなくなってたら、その時はお世話になりましょうよ。
そうだな。その時に考えりゃいいか。バトラーはどうする？
俺がいちゃお邪魔だろうからよ。気使って向こうに戻るぜ。
そうか。すぐ戻るのか？
さあな。一人で戻ったって寂しいしよ。子供全員で揃って帰ることにするぜ。
そうだな。そうするといい。それでバトラー、お前今夜はそうは簡単には寝ないだろう。
多分いとこたちとおしゃべりしてるだろうからな。夜更かししそうな気配はあるぜ。それがどうかしたのかよ。
そうか。もし大人たちの会議が終わってお前がまだ起きてたら、ちょいと家族でしたい話があるんだ。
なんだよ。 柄にもねえな。
Apparently, Kiri-san was thinking the same thing. What are you talking about? She asked him in a small voice. It looked like Kiri-san didn't have a clue what Dad was talking about either.
キリエにも聞いてもらいたい話だ。後で話すから今は聞くな。頼む。
I don't think there's anyone who ignores their family as much as this old bastard. And this was the guy that was asking us to have a talk as a family. Both Kiri-san and I couldn't help but get wide-eyed.
そうビビった顔すんなよ。ビビりてえのは俺の方なんだ。何しろ。
At that point, he swallowed his words for an instant. I don't remember Dad being that kind of person to artificially drum up suspense.
気持ち悪いぜ親父。今家族は全員揃ってるじゃねえかよ。もったいぶらずに言えよ。
俺は多分今夜殺されるだろうな。
There was a huge crash of thunder. It must have been really close. Dad's expression, brightly illuminated by the lightning, was burned into my eyes. Dad's face, which always looked so sure of itself, and which always wore a taunting expression, was, for some reason that I couldn't explain, strangely frail. It was so worn out that he looked like a different person.
は何言ってんだよ、柄でもね。
同感よ。どうしたの？急に弱気ね。あなたらしくもない。
俺も化粧直しに行ってくる。ついてくんなよ。
Dad turned away weakly. After that, only Kiri-san and I were left, still wide-eyed.
なんだってんだ。今夜殺される？まさかあの妙な手紙のせいで親父ビビっちまったのか？連続殺人者の映画の見過ぎだぜ。
Kiri-san didn't answer my light-hearted words and continued to stare at my dad's disappearing back.
バトラ君はルドルフさんに今話せと言ったら話さず立ち去った。みんなに話すことがあると言い出しながら答えなかった。どうして？チェス盤をひっくり返す。すると
話すと言っておきながら話せない矛盾。なんすかね。親父側から見ると何か見えてきますか？
ええ、見えるわよ。話したいことがある。でも自分から言い出す勇気がない。だから追ってきて俺に話しかけて聞き出してくれが正解ね。ついてくるなも逆の意味よ。ついてきて俺を問い詰めてくれが正解。まったく甘えん坊さんなんだから。
そういう推理でいいんすか？そんなんめちゃくちゃな。
名探偵や名刑事が男女の気持ちや心を推理できる？できないでしょ？異性の気持ちを探るのは何次元のトリックを暴くよりはるかに高度な技術なのよ。私に言わせれば名作推理小説より恋愛小説の方がよっぽど難解なミステリーなんだから。
はあ、そういうもんすかね。
私はあの甘えん坊さんと一緒にいるわ。普段は虚勢を張ってるけど今夜はかなりの激論で疲れ切ってる。誰かに寄りかかりたい気持ちなんでしょうね。それに応えるのがパートナーの役目よ。
はあ、そりゃお熱いことで。じゃあうちのクソ親父の世話をよろしく頼みますよ。
ええ、任せておいて。
As Kiri-san departed, I called out to her.
何？
いや、ありがとよって。おかげで陰鬱な気分がだいぶ晴れたぜ。
ならよかった。コミュニケーションは大事ね。
After answering with a wink, Kiri-san followed my dad. After my dad. Natsuhi could be found in a dimly lit hallway. Now and then the thunder would crash, but this had no effect on Natsuhi's expression. Her expression was completely worn out. The discussion that had just taken place between the relatives in the dining hall was repeating itself inside Natsuhi's mind. Beatrice had proclaimed that in addition to the gold, the headship and all the assets of the Ushimiya family would be given to the person who could solve the riddle. In other words, she planned to undermine the absolute guarantee that Kraus, as the oldest brother, had to succeed the family head. Originally, the other siblings had absolutely no chance to succeed the head. To them, this proposal by Beatrice was extremely desirable. It was obvious that they would accept Beatrice's proposal. Even without playing clumsy detective games, she knew that this so-called 19th person Beatrice couldn't exist. This was a message employing a fictional character called Beatrice as a messenger. It may as well have been written in Kinzo's own handwriting. The proof was that Kinzo remained stubbornly neutral as to the letter's authenticity. He was completely ignoring these reckless claims that he shouldn't be able to ignore, that he had given up the head's ring. In short, Kinzo had wordlessly admitted that the letter held his own message. Most likely, one of the servants had given Maria the letter. Kinzo was probably worked out an elaborate plan where the dress from the portrait would be prepared, and someone, probably Shannon, would be made to wear it and deliver the letter and the umbrella. By doing that, he could make it seem like the wish from the portrait actually existed. No, if anything, that is why you could be certain that Kinzo was behind all of this. In that case, it was just as if Kinzo had butted in on the siblings' private discussion, and by announcing that he would give everything to the person who could solve the riddle, Kinzo had weakened Kraus's overwhelming advantage. Now it was certain. Kinzo had listened in on the siblings' discussion in the parlor earlier that day, so he had known how Kraus had staved off the attack by the other three. And to make the scale of the battle go back into balance, he had sent out this strange... Excuse me, guys. Sorry about that. He had sent out this strange letter which benefited the other three. Eva and Rudolph had dragged Rosa in, who had a weak position among the siblings because of her age, and they were trying once again to overwhelm Kraus 3-on-1 and push through this crazy reasoning. And so they had resumed what they had once been a nearly decided conflict, and were repeatedly pressing Kraus to pay them a large amount of money. Talk about the advance payment, which had been denied once already, was being brought up again under the terms that all the siblings would guarantee Kraus the succession of the family head. Of course, even without the story about the hidden gold, the Ushimiya family's store of wealth was vast. Just that store was worth more than enough by itself. Even if the hidden gold was buried forever, along with Kinzo's death, there would be more than enough to satisfy. Therefore, even if they had no interest in the gold itself, there would be the lifelong fear that on the off chance that someone had found the gold, that person would be guaranteed the position of the family head. And this kind of Achilles heel would definitely be taken by someone sooner or later. The only person with this fatal weakness was the successor of the head, Kraus. The other siblings have found no. They had been told by Kinzo about something that only Kraus could lose, and they had thoroughly taken advantage of. Natsuhi, as Kraus's only ally in this painful position, and as his wife, had believed she was fighting alongside him. She kept trying to point out to him that the existence of the gold itself was a farce, and that there was no need for him to compromise. Kraus had always told Natsuhi. He had told all the siblings. He had always said that the hidden gold was nothing more than a fiction created by Kinzo. Therefore, Natsuhi had believed that, as his wife, and on that foundation, had supported her husband. Yet, her words could not reach him. Even though she was fighting so hard and letting all of his strength, he continued to fight by himself and was trying to compromise with the other three siblings. Wondering why she could not be of use to him, Natsuhi felt sorrow, shame, and then anger. It had happened when everyone decided to take a short break to cool their heads. Natsuhi had flared up against Kraus. In rage, she had asked why she could not be useful to him. She had told her that he wanted to talk about something and had invited her into one of his private rooms, which she was normally not allowed to enter. That room had been sealed with a heavy-looking padlock, and just looking at it had given her an uncomfortable feeling.
他の3人の言うことも、ベアトリーチェを名乗る不審人物の言うことも、何も気にかけることはありません。黄金など所詮はお父様が生み出したまやかし。それを見つけられることなどあるわけがない。あなたの跡継ぎであることは盤石です。何を恐れることがあるのです。
Kraus removed the padlock on the door. He then motioned for Natsuhi to enter.
入りたまえ。
何ですか？
見せたいものがある。君に初めて見せるものだ。
Natsuhi timidly opened the door with a dubious expression on her face. It was pitch black. She searched for a switch to turn on the lights, but since this was her first time in the room, she didn't know where it was. Kraus entered behind her, pushing her in, and closed the door before making any attempt to turn on the lights. The two were swallowed up by the darkness. Only the sound of Kraus locking the door rang out through the dark.
これは何事ですか？明かりは？
今つける。待ちたまえ。
True to his word, Kraus pushed the switch on the wall, and a flickering light turned on and lit up the room.
それは。
Natsuhi had her breath taken away. The room had no windows, and at glance it appeared to be empty. In the middle of the room, a small round table had been set, and the lights brightened only the table, as if it were the leading part in the play. Laid out on top of the table was a red tablecloth of elaborate design covered with dust, and on top of that, something about the size of a grown man's arm had been set down. That something took Natsuhi's breath away.
凄まじい純度を持つ黄金のインゴットだよ。こいつがなければ誰も黄金伝説を信じはしなかった。
It was an ingot of solid gold. Even in the faint light, it sparkled with a noble and dignified gold glint.
こいつはまともなインゴットじゃない。このインゴットを鋳造したのが国内なのか国外なのか、それすらも私にはわからないんだ。
It takes a high level of skill to make the purest of solid gold ingots. And in order to verify that purity, it is standard to have the original foundry and the name of the bank that guaranteed it imprinted on the gold. However, this ingot did not have that kind of seal. This mysterious gold bar had come from an unknown foundry.
ここを見たまえ。怯えることはない。こいつはただの金塊だ。
Natsuhi, following Kraus's words, timidly approached the ingot.
そこだ。
Kraus pointed at the surface of the ingot. Natsuhi concentrated on that section. Right there was the thin imprint of the one-winged eagle crest. Natsuhi's breath was taken away once again.
そうだよ。これこそが親父がベアトリーチェに与えられたといい、保証人のマルソーの会長に任意で一つを抜き取らせて持ち帰らせ、財界のフィクサーたちを信用させたという伝説のインゴットなのだよ。方々に手を尽くして私が見つけた。他の兄弟たちより早くね。
そんな。じゃあお父様の黄金伝説は？
実在する。後ろ宮金蔵が授けられたベアトリーチェの黄金は実在するのだよ。
そんな。本当にあるなんて。
Natsuhi was shocked. Kraus had always said that Kinzo's gold was just a fabrication, so she had believed it as his wife. However, the reality was different. He had held definite proof and had been more certain than any of the other siblings that the legend of the gold was true. Because of this, Kraus was deeply frightened at the possibility that somebody other than himself would find the gold that he had failed to find, costing him everything. But to Natsuhi, this truth was more than enough to split open her heart. She had thought that, as Kraus's wife, she should be the closest confidant, which was why she had been selflessly supporting him, and yet he had hidden this fact from her until today. Why?
そこまでに私はあなたの信頼に足りないというのですか。
そういうつもりはない。話す必要がなかっただけだ。
あなたにとっては妻はその程度のものなのですか。
落ち着きたまえ。劇場にすぐ駆られるのは君の悪い癖だ。
あなたがそうさせてるんじゃないですか。私は後宮家に嫁ぎ、今日まであなたの妻として仕えてきました。あなたのために生まれた家を捨て、身も心も捧げてお仕えしてきました。その報いがこれなんですか。そんなことって。
Kraus grimaced, looking annoyed. His expression effectively communicated how much he disliked this part of Natsuhi.
私はもうあなたの力になれそうもありません。
うん。それでいい。兄弟のトラブルを私が自分の力で解決する。君の力は借りんよ。
違います。これは後宮家のトラブルです。確かに私にはこの身に家紋を刻むことが許されていません。でもあなたの妻です。なのに私には力添えする資格もないのですか。あなた。
君を思えばこそあえて関わらせなかったのだ。これ以上は頭痛に触ると。君は今夜はこれで休みたまえ。兄弟の話は兄弟でつける。君は関係ない。それだけだ。
A dull headache tormented Natsuhi. No matter what medicine she took, no matter what scent she burned, it wouldn't heal. On the other hand, by standing here alone in a dimly lit corridor, her head filled with the sound of the rain, she felt like the pain had softened a little. I may have been Natsuhi, but I was not Ushirimiya Natsuhi. What? Denigrated? Okay. Denigrated as being a sorry excuse for a wife. Verbally abused for not even being able to take care of that. Even so, I tried to properly perform the duties of a wife, but have been rejected, even by my husband. I did my best, raising my daughter as though it was the last job left to me. However, my age and sadness, having no place to go, caused me to subconsciously strain that relationship too. Because I have been excessively strict in Jessica's education, I am thoroughly disliked by her. Jessica despised me for not being interested in anything but grades. There is no longer anything I can do for the Ushirimiya family. No, that's not good. Even so, I must help my husband dislodge the scheme of the other greedy siblings. The head won't be around much longer. Eventually, Kraus will succeed the head, and the next successor will be Jessica. Strictly speaking, the man who enters the family by marrying Jessica will become the next head, but it all comes to the same thing. I have to make Jessica an excellent successor, who everyone will accept as worthy to take over the Ushirimiya family. In the years to come, that greedy Ushirimiya Eva will surely be continually plotting to find some fault with the main family, so that if all goes as she plans, Jessica will be dragged down from the succession with George in her place. It is regrettable, but George is a man, and even more, has matured as a person. If you compared him to Jessica, who is right in the middle of her rebellious period and whose grades are below average, you can see at a glance who is more fit to succeed the head. So in order to secure Jessica's position, I need to turn her into an excellent person. After doing that, I want to find her an excellent husband, worthy of the excellent person she will have become. A wonderful man, who will truly accept Jessica and stay with her through all of life's joys and sorrows. Was that Natsuhi trying to entrust her daughter with fulfilling some desire of her own? Natsuhi thought back to the days when she had no choice but to marry into the Ushirome family because of that unfavorable fate. She had tried to block that from her memory. She had consciously forgotten that, and had actively attended to the life she had been given as Ushirome Natsuhi. And this was the new life she had built. But it felt like, just now, all of that had been casually rejected.
何を考えて生きていけばいいのかわからない。
Natsuhi helplessly rested her head against the glass of the window. The glass, cooled by the raindrops beating against it, was somehow refreshing, and even though it had no emotions, right then, it seemed to be the only thing that could understand Natsuhi. Even if someone showed up there and asked her like this, and saw her like this, Natsuhi had no intention of caring in the least, but she found herself caring, because it was her beloved daughter.
母さんか。なんだよ、こんなところに。幽霊かと思ったぜ。
She, like always, her words were rough and not at all like a girl's. Instinctively, words of rebuke rose to Natsuhi's throat. However, they did so only weakly, and so she was able to prevent them from escaping her lips.
ジェシカ、ごめんね。母さんは頭痛がひどいの。そっとしといてくれる。
そう。
Jessica was more than slightly disconcerted by this first ever sight of feebleness from her mother. Until just now, she had been filled with contempt for all of the parents, including her mother. But now, not the slightest bit of that feeling remained. All of it had been wiped out by her mother's completely exhausted face. In its place, the words that George had told her floated back up in her mind. The parents are doing their best in their own way. They are supporting their family, so they can't afford to keep everything pleasant and have a heavy responsibility to fight. Couldn't her mother have been standing around in this dimly lit hallway because no one had tried to understand that? Jessica didn't like her mother, so she had no instinct to give her mother words of kindness just because she looked a little frail. Therefore, in order to give those words regardless, she had to clench both her fists and wrench the words out from the depths of her heart.
ずいぶん立て込んだ話をしてるようじゃん。
お前には関係ありません。よそへ行っていなさい。
頭痛ひどい？私、薬もらってこようか。
構わないで結構です。お願いだから、一人きりにして。
Natsuhi was not being cold to her. She just wanted to get her daughter far away from her so that she could avoid subjecting her to her short temper. But there was no chance that her intentions would reach Jessica. Jessica hung her head, looking sad. Looking at that expression, Natsuhi realized that Jessica was trying to muster up the strength to be kind to her mother. She gave her head a small shake to drive away her own unkind feelings.
じゃあ私、行くよ。大人の邪魔にならないように、いとこたちと一緒にいるから。じゃあ。
お待ちなさい。
She called Jessica, about to make her desolate escape to a stop.
気遣いをありがとう。お前を残して寝込むわけにはいきません。
よせよ。縁起でもないぜ。
心配をかけました。もう大丈夫です。私は行きます。
Staying here any longer with such a feeble expression would actually make her daughter feel more uncomfortable. Thinking this, Natsuhi left Jessica with words of gratitude and made her depart. This time, it was Jessica who called out to her mother's back. Natsuhi stopped, turned around, and asked what she wanted. But Jessica herself didn't know why she had stopped her mother, and for a while she muttered to herself with a slightly forced smile as she hesitated over what to say. She was poking around in her pocket, when her hand touched something and she took it out.
あのさ、母さん、私さ、今日お守りもらったんだよ。なんだっけな、魔除けだったっけ。確かそのドアノブにぶら下げてるといいんだっけ。忘れちまったぜ。私が持ってても仕方ないし、母さんにあげるよ。
It was a scorpion charm that Maria had given to her by the beach that day. Although she had heard of its various effects from Maria right now, Jessica's mind was blank, and it was all she could do to say even that much. Thinking that her mother probably wouldn't accept the charm anyway, Jessica had immediately drawn back the hand offering it to her. So when Natsuhi came back and took hold of that hand, she was extremely surprised.
これは何かの景品？
まあ私も多分そうだろうと思ってるけどよ。こんなおもちゃみたいなお守りじゃご利益は期待できねえよな。
But her mother took the scorpion charm from her grip.
ありがとう。大切にします。ジェシカには今度、私が子供の頃大切にしていたお守りを代わりにあげましょう。
別にそんなつもりで渡すんじゃないぜ。でもまあどうしてもって言うなら。
では私はもう休みます。頭痛がひどいので、ジェシカもあまり夜更かしをしすぎないように。
うん。
Natsui put the charm in her pocket and turned away. She then disappeared into the dark hall.
やっぱり明日も丸一日こんな天気みたいだね。
やれやれ、今日の日中が嘘のようだぜ。
George, Aniki, and I were killing time in front of the parlor television. At that point, Jessica returned. Her face was still blank, but it looked like she had calmed down a little since she had left.
マリアはまだ肖像画前？
いや、さっき戻ってきて、今はそっちのソファーで寝てるぜ。マリアにはもう遅い時間だもんな。
Looking at the clock, it was a little past 10 p.m. Even if we were going to stay up all night, it was about time to head back to our room.
一応うちのおふくろが屋敷にも部屋を用意してくれたんだけどよ。どうする？
僕はゲストハウスに戻りたいかな。親たちの様子を見る限り、僕たちはお屋敷にいない方がいいと思う。
俺も同感だぜ。子供は邪魔せず引っ込んでろって感じみてえだからな。おとなしくそうするさ。
After we discussed that, Auntie Rosa came into the parlor. She was looking all over restlessly, probably trying to find Maria.
ローザおばさん、マリアならそこのソファーっすよ。
ありがとう。すっかり眠っちゃってるわね。ベッドに移さないと。
よかったら僕がベッドまで背負っていきましょうか。
ありがとう。助かるわ。ジョージ君たちはゲストハウスに戻るの？それとも夏日姉さんが用意してくれた部屋に泊まるのかしら？
今話し合ってました。ゲストハウスへ戻ろうかって話になったところです。
そう。ならマリアも一緒にしてあげてもいいかしら。いとこのみんなと一緒の方がきっと安心できると思うしね。
It seemed that in the shadow behind those words, there was some regret that the adults, herself included, had deeply hurt Maria's feelings.
任してくださいよおばさん。何しろこっちにゃマリアをあやすことに関してはエキスパートがいるっすからね。
それは僕のことかい？僕だけじゃ無理だよ。みんなでだよ。
そうだぜ。バトラだってあんなにもマリアと意気投合してふざけ合ってたじゃねえかよ。
As we said this, Auntie Rosa smiled, looking truly happy.
みんなありがとう。私たちの話し合いはだいぶ遅くまでかかりそう。だから申し訳ないけどマリアをみんなにお願いするわ。
おいマリア、熟睡か？ゲストハウスに戻るぞ。
Maria muttered something indistinct as if answering, but then rolled over and fell back asleep. It looked like she was sleeping deeply.
すっかり寝込んじゃったようだぜ。起こすのは悪いな。
うん、僕が背負うよ。
Maria's body was much lighter than it looked. George Aniki picked her up and pulled her over his back. It was raining hard outside and Aniki couldn't hold an umbrella and carry Maria at the same time. It looked like Auntie Rosa would come with us as far as the guest house to help out. However, when she heard Uncle Kraus's voice call out to her, she had no choice but to return.
困ったわね。もう戻らないと。
あ、皆さんゲストハウスまでお戻りですか？
After we left the hall on the way to the entrance, the door to the servants' room opened and Shannon-chan stepped out.
だいぶ暗くなっておりますので、私がご案内させていただきます。
ちょうどよかったわ、シャノンちゃん。ジョージ君がマリアをおぶっていってくれるの。傘をさしてあげてくれないかしら。
はい、かしこまりました。
Shannon-chan brought umbrellas for each of us and a flashlight to guide their way. As we opened the front door, the downpour was quite terrific. It looked like we wouldn't have any spare time to take a pleasant walk and enjoy the nighttime rose
兄
garden.
貴、重くねえか？俺が背負うぜ。
大丈夫だよ。マリアちゃんくらい背負えるよ。
本当にありがとうね。マリアをよろしくお願い。
うん、わかりました。じゃあおやすみなさい、おばさん。それではお送りしてまいります。
ええ、よろしく。
Auntie Rosa saw us off.
マリア、いつもごめんね。
Maria's mumbling voice didn't reach the person in question, nor anyone else, but disappeared beneath the sound of the rain. After cutting through the rainy rose garden, we arrived at the guest house.
俺がマリアを背負って立候補すりゃよかったぜ。そうすりゃ傘をさしてくれるシャノンちゃんのでっけえお胸を二の腕でたっぷり堪能できたってのによ。
そんなつもりじゃないよ。誤解だよ。
そうしないとジョージ様が濡れてしまうと思いまして。ほーら、バカなこと言ってないで入るぜ。
After being nudged by Jessica, Shannon folded up her umbrella and went into the guest house.
お召し物を濡らしてしまった方はいらっしゃいませんか？タオルを用意いたしますが。
そこまで気を使わなくていいぜ。ありがとよ、シャノンちゃん。
そうだ。僕たちはこれからトランプでもして少し遊ばないかって話なんだけど、よかったら少し一緒しないかい？
あれ？今日のシフト、深夜勤は誰になってんだ？親族会議中は特別シフトになってたと思いました。少し変更も出てるみたいなので、ちょっと確認してきます。
ああ、わざわざ屋敷に戻らないとわからないんなら無理に。
大丈夫です。ゲストハウスの使用人室でわかりますので、ちょっと失礼しますね。
Shannon-chan gave a quick bow and went into the guest house servant's room. The rest of us headed to the cousin's room and put Maria in bed for the time being. Maria was sleeping very deeply and there was absolutely no sign of her eyes opening. We got some drinks out of the room's refrigerator and spent some time playing cards while drinking.
あれ？カノン君？源氏様までこちらに。今夜のシフトはどうなっているのでしょうか？
クラウス様の命令があってね、シフトの大掛かりな変更があったんだよ。
ゴーダがお屋敷の深夜勤に変更になった。シャノンとカノンはゲストハウスの深夜勤。私と熊沢はゲストハウスに泊まるようにとのご命令だ。お前も今夜はこのままこちらにとどまるよう。たった今電話があった。
ずいぶん大掛かりな変更ですね。
お屋敷とゲストハウスの当番がまるっきり逆になってるじゃないですか。
Originally, Shannon and Kenan had been given the night shift in the mansion, while the night shift in the guest house, where all the relatives were staying, had been assigned to Goda, who had an abundance of experience in entertaining. Kumasawa had been scheduled to stay in the guest house, while Genji had been scheduled to stay in the mansion. However, it seemed that Kraus had suddenly ordered that the schedule be modified. The shifts at the guest house and the mansion had all been reversed, and Genji was Genji was spending the night in the guest house.
多分ベアトリーチェ様の手紙のせいだろうね。
多分ってどうして？
あんな怪しげな手紙が現れたらクラウス様が僕たちを疑うのは当然だからね。親方様直属の僕たちを極力親族会議の席から遠ざけたかったんだろうよ。
Genji, Shannon, and Kanon were all permitted to wear the Ushimiya family crest, the one-winged eagle, as the servants who served directly under Kinzo. Of course, since they were working for the Ushimiya family, they had to obey anyone's orders, but their only boss was Kinzo. Since only Kinzo held the right to employ them, even Kraus could not have them dismissed on his own right accord. Because of this, there was often viewed by Kraus and the others as Kinzo's underling and shunned. And in reality, Kinzo would seldom let anyone other than them enter his study. You could probably call this sudden shift change a clear expression of that sense of distrust. Considering the time Kinzo had left to live, there would definitely be the last family conference before the problem of the inheritance would come up. However, that the mysterious letter that claimed to be from Beatrice had dropped in out of the blue. Kraus definitely wanted to help Kinzo's loyal subjects away from the table of such a delicate and important discussion.
ではすまんが、私は向こうでくつろがせてもらう。もし何かあったらすぐに呼ぶように。今夜のお客様は特別だ。
はい、かしこまりました。源氏様。
Genji nodded back, went behind the screen, took off his jacket, and slowly began to relax after a day's worth of tension.
今お戻りになられたのはお子様方。
親族の方々はお屋敷で会議を。だいぶ長引きそうな雰囲気だったかな。
なら気楽だね。これ以上の深夜になって、しかもこの天気。多分親族の皆さんはお屋敷の方のお部屋にお泊まりさ。
多分ね。源氏様がいないから言うけど、ゲストハウス行きになってちょっと嬉しかったかな。
ふん、どうしてだい？意地悪な奥様やエヴァ様から離れられたから？それとも別の理由があるのかい？
別の理由なんかありません。
そっか。なら二人で深夜勤を頑張ろう。よろしく、姉さん。
私ついさっきお子様方にお部屋で遊ばないかとお呼ばれしてて。
Shannon hung her head apologetically and made uncertain glances towards Kenan's eyes. Kenan didn't try to meet her gaze and spoke curtly as she sighed. It looked like he didn't plan on indulging his sister.
ダメだよ。深夜勤を仰せつかってる。それに僕たち家具には遊びのお誘いは必要ない。わかるね。
そんなことわかってます。
Shannon dropped her shoulders slightly. She had already expected that Kenan, who considered rules to be very important, would probably say something like that. But even so, she was a little discouraged. As Kenan turned the pages of a logbook, he spoke without facing Shannon.
なら、お子様方お待たせしてしまってるね。深夜勤に当たってしまったから、ご一緒できないと謝ってこなきゃ。行ってきなよ。
私、謝ってくるね。
Shannon hurriedly stood from her seat before her brother's mood could change, gave a quick bow, and flew out of the servant room. As he watched her disappear, Kennen took a single deep breath. Genji's voice came from behind the screen.
カノ、私がここにいるから、お前も行くといい。
源氏様、誘われたのはシャノンだけです。僕は別に誘われては。
その場にいなかったからお声をかけられなかっただけだ。言えばお前も誘われている。たまには子供らしく遊んでくるといい。
いえ、僕には必要ない行為です。人の子には遊びも必要でしょうが、僕らは家具ですから。
そうか。
姉さんだって家具です。人のふりをしたって後で苦しむだけなのに、僕はそれが分かっているから人に近づきたくないだけなんです。
Genji did not say anything after that. A few moments passed, and then he stood up, used a pot of hot water to make some hot chocolate from powder, and served it to Kennen as well.
そりゃ本当かよ。そりゃ知らなかったぜ。
バカ、声が大きいぜ。マリアが起きちゃうだろ。
Father was so surprised that he yelled obnoxiously and scattered his cards everywhere. His voice caused Maria to turn over once, but she soon fell back into a deep sleep. Jessica gave him a jab and he lowered his voice.
いや、しかし言われてみれば確かにそれっぽい雰囲気はあったんだよな。なるほどな。ジョージの兄貴がな。
George had not been seen anywhere in the room. A short while ago, when Shannon had come into the room, George had suddenly said that he had forgotten something to mention and needed to go back and get it. Shannon had said would guide him, just like she had on the way to the guest house, and the two of them had departed together. Woo! I'm sorry, y'all. I'm tired.
いや、昔からそれっぽい気配はあったんだぜ。好きなものを聞いてきたり、趣味を聞いてきたりさ。単に関心を持つだけにしてはどうもなんて思ってたらよ。
そういや、昔っからジョージの兄貴はシャノンちゃんにやたらと優しかった気がするぜ。なるほどな。
天気予報によると今夜が一番ひどいみたい。明日いっぱいも止まないらしいけど、もう少しマシになるそうだよ。
そうですか。では明後日までは船は来られないかもしれませんね。ジョージ様の月曜日のお勤めに差し支えが出ないか心配です。
台風が来ていることは知っていたからね。万一に備えて月曜日には予定を入れなかったから大丈夫さ。こう見えてもスケジュールは先読みできるタイプなんだ。
George puffed down his chest, acting proud. Compared to the normally composed appearance that George always had as the oldest cousin, he now looked amusingly like a little kid. Shannon chuckled at this gap.
さすが、やがては会社を起こされる方はしっかりしていますね。
やっぱり会社を起こすというのは大変だね。お金とかそういうのだけじゃないものがとても大事だって父さんのところで勉強していてわかるよ。会社を起こすということは城を持ち部下を率いるということ。うちの父さんは秀吉って名前だけあって戦国武将のエピソードがとても好きでね。会社経営の哲学をよくそこから語るんだ。知ってるかい？戦国最強の騎馬軍団と恐れられた武田信玄も最初は部下たちの結束がバラバラで統率力をまるで発揮できなかったんだそうだよ。
そうなんですか？なんだか意外ですね。
信玄は部下たちを結束させるため 数々のリーダーシップを発揮してるんだよ。例えば戦場で武功を立てた部下に対しすぐその場で報奨を与えたり、普通こういうのは戦が終わってからまとめてやるものだからね。それを戦場の本陣の中にいながらまめにやり続け、部下の武功を素早く評価しやる気につなげたというのは非常に大きいことだよ。それから部下が病気で伏せった時には誰よりも早く駆けつけお見舞いをしたとかね。武田信玄は戦国最強の騎馬軍団を率いただけじゃない、戦国一の部下思いの人だったんだよ。
そんな方だから部下の皆さんもついてきてくれたんですね。
The truth was, Shannon had already heard this story several years ago. But when George started to tie his father in with one of those stories, he would always be beaming, looking like he was having a great time. So Shannon did not interrupt, but merely smiled to encourage him to continue.
確かに資本主義の世界ではお金は力で石垣の高さでもある。でもね、戦も城も自分一人じゃ成り立たない。大勢の部下に支えられ、その力を借りて初めて成立するものなんだよ。それを理解してから父さんの背中を見ると、自分がいかに未熟で父さんがどれほどの切磋琢磨をして今日を築き上げてきたかがよくわかるんだ。
ジョージ様はお父様のことをとても尊敬されているんですね。羨ましいです。
あ、ごめん。別にそういう意味で言ったんじゃないんだよ。
すみません。私も別にそういう意味で言ったつもりは。
The two of them awkwardly looked at their feet. Shannon had no parents. She had been brought up in a welfare institute owned by Kinzo called the Gospel House. Under the guidance of the honorary director, Kinzo, the Gospel House offered excellent students a chance to live a life of service. If they were accepted, they would be able to leave the institute and work as servants for the Umineko family. This was considered to be the highest honor for a student. Servants from the Gospel Fukuin House all took names with the characters in, on, non in them while they served. So, Shannon wasn't her real name. The same goes for Canon. All the students of the Gospel House were orphans, or, failing that, people who had been discovered by their parents through some special disowned by their parents through some special circumstances. Because of this, the students have been taught to think of each other as their only family. That's why it seemed so natural to Canon to call Shannon his sister. And while only Shannon and Canon were working today in the mansion, there were other servants who worked in the shift rotation, named Manon and Lennon, who also inherited the Nun character in their name. However, there were not many servants who stayed in the Umineko family for long. It was standard for them to quit after 3 years, so you could probably say that Shannon, who had been working for over 10 years, was a very rare exception to the rule. Working as a servant from the Umineko family was a heavy burden to bear, but the pay wasn't bad at all. Working for a full 3 years would earn more than what was needed to enter mainstream society. That was why, even though the students realized what a harsh task working for the Umineko family was, they still hoped to be accepted. But in Shannon's case, maybe the fact that she had managed to continue for more than 10 years should not be viewed as her having more willpower than any of the other servants. Maybe it was a lack of courage to say that she wanted to quit that forced her to continue working for those years. To Kinzo, who could not even trust his own blood relatives, those excellent servants sent from the Gospel House were the only ones he could trust. Because of that, Kinzo would sometimes allow them to wear the family crest as servants under his direct control, and have them work close to him.
もう勤めて10年近くになるんだっけ。だいぶお金も貯まったんじゃないかい。
どうでしょう。別に私 買いたいものも特にありませんし、ほんの何百万かあったってそれで残りの人生を過ごせるわけもありませんし。
目標の額があってお勤めを続けてるわけじゃないのかい？
そうですね。私はこのお屋敷以外に行くあてもありませんし、お嬢様とも他の使用人の子たちとも仲良くやれてますし、奥様には時折お叱りを受けますけど、バラの世話やお屋敷のお掃除も楽しいですし。
でもそれはシャノンちゃんのサヨちゃんの人生じゃない。
Shannon cast her eyes downward when she heard her real name. She understood what she understood what George was trying to say and closed her mouth.
僕は成人し社会人になってからも勉強して分かったことがある。子供の頃僕らが思っていたほど人生は単調で短くないんだ。
That horrifying thought that everyone had in their years, that horrifying thought that everyone has in their student years. Will the rest of my life be like a monotonous, boring, sleeping-inducing after-school class, where I endlessly, lazily while away the time until finally it ends without anything interesting ever happening? However, those thoughts only arise when a person is still an underage student. Compared to a human's life, the time they spend as a student is nothing more than a blink of an eye, just a period before the breakout of their shells and cast off their immaturity. The inside of the shell might be hot, suffocating, and boring world, but the world beyond that shell is vast and filled with limitless possibilities.
君の人生はまだシャノンという殻の中でしかないんだ。君は自分の人生がこの生活のままずっと続いていくと勘違いしてるんじゃないかな。
それは。
Shannon couldn't deny those words. She hadn't been able to find any concrete issue with her way of life, and since she never had any desire or goal to change herself in any particular way, she had continued her life idly. And if she was asked whether her life was already fulfilled, she wouldn't necessarily have been able to nod. That may have been a truth she was deliberately averting her eyes from. As long as George did not realize that truth, she would have continued pretending not to notice as her real life slipped away, neglected bit by bit.
庄司様、私はこのままでいてはいけないのでしょうか。
いけないよ。あ、それから今ルール違反が一つあったね。
George immediately gave a strict answer and then broke out into a mischievous smile. Shannon already knew what she was being chided for, and it seemed that it embarrassed her as she hung her head.
僕たちしかいないときは様はなしの約束だよ。
約束では聞けません。ですが、ご命令でしたら聞かないわけにはいきません。私は家具ですから。
じゃあ命令だよ。
はい、かしこまりました、ジョージさん。
As Shannon hung her head, her face red, she said George's name again, this time using san.
それでいいよ、さよちゃん。
A smile rose to George's face, praising Sayo's small act of bravery. The way they talked with each other gave off the sense that their relationship had been ongoing for some time. For a long while, as if the weather raging around them didn't even enter their consciousness, the two of them talked about that many memories they've built during their relationship that no one else knew about. Every once in a while, a flash of lightning would attempt to dampen the mood, but it could not sully their moments, which seemed to flush even the roses outside a deeper shade of red. Outside a deeper shade of red, yeah.
そうだ。君に見せたいものがあって。
なんでしょうか。
George, who had been speaking eloquently. I cannot say words. George, who had been speaking eloquently, suddenly started to stutter. From his manner, Shannon too understood something. George timidly searched through his pocket for it. It got caught deep in his pocket somehow and came out somewhat slowly and awkwardly, in the same manner as his speech. It was a very small box. A very small box covered in a deep blue velvet. Its characteristic shape was enough to make anyone realize what was resting inside. Shannon had been preparing her heart a little, sure of what it must be. But even so, when she actually saw it, she couldn't avoid blushing once more. George opened the small box, took it out, and held it out for Shannon to take.
これを君に受け取ってほしいんだ。
このような高価なものはお受け取りできません。
受け取れない？
いえ、こんなもの私には過ぎていて。
さよ、これはお願いじゃない、命令だよ。この指輪を受け取ってね。
命令では従わなくてはなりません。
うん、そうだね。いい子だよ。
Oh my, I gotta say it like that. Shannon, not wanting to show her bright red face, timidly accepted the ring from George's hand while still staring at the ground. The ring wasn't a simple accessory. It was a noble object, which since ancient times was meant to be offered to a special woman, was with a special meaning. So while George could order her to take it, he could not order anything beyond that. Anything beyond that would depend not on an order, but on Shannon's, no, Sayo's own will.
だからここからはもう命令じゃない。さよ、明日までに言葉でない形で返事わかるね。
どうすれば。
もうこれ以上は命令じゃないから、僕は君に命令はしない。でも指輪は指にするものだからね。気に入ってくれたなら好きな指につけてくれればいい。
Shannon had only pretended not to know. She had already understood what he wanted her to do. But she was standing at a huge crossroad of her life.
もうこんな時間だね。今夜はこれくらいにしよう。
George faced away from Shannon, seemingly slightly uncomfortable.
君に左手につけてほしいと命令することもできるかもしれない。君も命令されればそれに従えるという臆病な甘えがあるかもしれない。でも最後のここだけは君わかるね。
はい。
だからそれが命令。今夜よく考えて明日その返事を見せてほしい。
Shannon nodded back. Today was the culmination of their long relationship. This moment had not come as any surprise to Shannon.
そろそろゲストハウスに戻ろうか。これ以上遅いとみんなを心配させちゃうよ。
すみません。私、お屋敷に用を思い出しまして、お屋敷へ行かねばなりません。
こんな時間に本当かな。
George stared into Shannon's face as he laughed mischievously. He had seen through this obvious lie of Shannon's. But imagining how she felt, it wasn't as if he couldn't understand her embarrassment and why she might ask to be alone. And so, George, having understood Shannon's lie and all that was behind it, allowed her to leave. Well, that was the end of chapter 9. They talked over about, you know, the witch Beatrice giving Maria the letter. And you saw that cute little scene with George and Shannon, and basically, in a way, George was proposing to her, but in the end of the day, it was Shannon's choice. We went over Shannon's real name is Sayo, which is pretty cool. We don't know Cannon's real name, though. But, yeah, this was a very interesting chapter. Things are slowly setting up for something. But yeah, so that was chapter 9 of Umineko Legend of the Golden Witch. So I'll be posting again soon. A lot of things in life, like work and stuff, is coming up, and so I'm trying to do my best to manage my time to make more videos for you all. So, well, I guess until then, I'll see y'all next time.